Roots and shoots, leafy greens and flowers, and fruits and nuts nourish people along the Atlantic coast for thousands of years. The plants explored in the Indigenous Peoples Perspective Project through Adkins Arboretum and Washington College offer a glimpse into what may be part of our food-resilient future. Blackberries were gathered from summer to fall. Indigenous peoples ate the ripe berries fresh, ground with wild game to make pemmican cakes, or dried and stored for later consumption. Elderberries were crushed, strained, and boiled into a syrup, made into a jam, and used as a sweetener in various recipes. The ripe fruits of pawpaws dropped from trees in early fall, blanketing the forest floor with a sweet aroma. They were gathered as a dessert fruit with the large seeds removed. Fallen persimmon were used in jams and baked goods, or dried like prunes for storage. The fruit pulp could be turned into molasses, and the pressed seeds made a peanut-like oil, or were roasted and used for coffee-like beverages. The dried leaves made a tea high in vitamin C. Strings of groundnut tubers were collected year-round. Some tribes with access to birch or maple syrup baked groundnuts to produce a dish reminiscent of candied yams. When not peeled and cooked for fresh use, the tubers were dried and stored, or made into a flour for soups, stews, breads, and cakes. Groundnut pods produce pea-like seeds that can be cooked like beans. Indigenous peoples across North America used acorns from oak trees as a staple food. Once shelled, acorns were soaked to remove bitter tannins. The dried nut meat was ground into a meal for baking or used in soups and porridges. The larger nuts of hickory trees were also used by native peoples. With the husk removed, hickory nuts were eaten raw or cooked. Hickory bark was used in beverages. Black walnuts were an important ingredient in corn soups and several other traditional native dishes. The fresh nuts would be crushed and boiled to make a beverage. Sassafras leaves would thicken and flavor soups. The roots and bark were used to flavor beverages and were the original ingredient in root beer. The leaves, stems, and flowers of violets were used widely as food, eaten raw or cooked. Flowers and tender leaves were eaten raw, and cooked leaves were used as a thickening agent in soups. The edible blossoms of black locust were enjoyed raw or cooked. They would be gathered between the spring equinox and summer solstice. Indigenous people ate the boiled young sprouts of milkweed like asparagus. They cooked the unopened floral bud clusters and firm green fruits, as well as the tender leaves and upper stalks. Milkweed flowers and buds thickened soups, and dried buds were stored for winter use. The latex was boiled and mixed with animal fat for a chewing gum. Spiced bush berries were used to flavor foods such as possum or groundhog. Leaves and twigs were used for beverages, as were those of river birch, which also has a sap used in beverages. The drupes of sumac were eaten or consumed as tea. The bark was eaten as a delicacy, and sprouts were peeled and consumed raw. The roots of evening primrose were eaten raw or cooked. Young leaves were cooked as a vegetable, and the flowers and seeds provided flavor and nourishment throughout summer and fall. As we restore our landscapes with native plants, we can begin to revive the traditions of indigenous peoples that nourished human communities for millennia and integrate ourselves as participants in the environment that sustain us.